What up? Wade here. So today what we're going to talk about is confidence, how to build core confidence. And so recently I was up on YouTube checking out my own stats, looking through my news feed, and I saw someone trying to explain what confidence was. And it actually, what they were saying, number one, it created more confusion than anything else. And number two, it actually does more harm than good, and it leads to less confidence and more self-doubt than anything else. And what's really interesting is after teaching for the last 10 years, starting off as a dating coach, confidence from the beginning was something that was fundamental in my teaching process. But if I look back now on how I taught then compared to what I know today, things are completely different and it's flipped onto the other side completely. And so what we're going to do here is get into specifically how to create confidence. So what is confidence? What it comes down to is confidence, or you could call it self-trust, which is basically the same thing. They're both intangible. You can't grab onto them. You can't say, I'm going to take you confidence and I'm going to raise it up. So what you need to do is dial in deeper and understand the meaning behind confidence, because the feeling of confidence to me is totally different than the feeling to you. In the same way that self-trust is different to me than it is to you, and the definition of both is different as well. So what we want to do is come up first with a mutually understanding of what the definition is. And so confidence, what you want to look at it is, all it comes down to is a thought or a belief that you have, and it's contextual. And so if we talk about, like, let's say the sun coming up or something like that. In the morning you wake up, okay, I have a certain level of confidence that the sun is going to come up. So I have the belief that the sun will rise this morning, and my level of confidence comes in there related to that belief. And so when you dive into then next going, okay, now let's dive into what beliefs we have here. And when you focus there, now we have something that we can work with. And so this leads to the question, where do beliefs come from? And this is really where a lot of coaches just kind of go, I don't even want to go that far into it. And instead they just give these sort of self-help truisms saying, oh, just think great positive things about yourself. Remove the internal dialogue. Stop being so critical of yourself and thinking poorly. And then you hear that and you go, well, how do I do that? What am I supposed to do here? And really to dive into that level, this is stuff that I learned. I was apprenticing with world-class therapist. Her name was Barbara Stepp, and her husband, they lived off in San Juan Islands, which is it Washington? Something like that, right? Cool. Videographers from there. And so what I learned from that is these people, they literally inspired NLP and the movement in the early 80s, as well as working with Tony Robbins, which he basically just does a form of NLP too, when he was in his 20s, going out in San Juan Islands and meeting these therapists. What they talk about is going into the subconscious. Dave Dobson called it your other than conscious mind, and into the deepest recesses. What is he calls it an experience file. And so every experience you have ever had goes into that experience file. You might not remember all of them, but every experience is in there. And then when it turns from a thought to a belief is when you tack on a meaning to it. And therefore you have a certain belief about certain things and about certain thoughts. And you might say, well, I don't agree with that. I don't have every thought. A lot of things I forget all the time. The experience file is there, but it's on the subconscious level. And so what you need to do is take those out of the subconscious and make them conscious. And we're also going to talk about, a lot of times it's so automated that you don't even realize that feeling of confidence in certain situations. There was a thought first. And so maybe it's, all of a sudden you're doing this new marketing strategy in your business and you go into your analytics and you see that it didn't go well. Boom! All of a sudden you feel like shit, you feel stressed out, you're anxious, and you didn't even realize that the thought that went through your mind was, I'm never going to be successful at this, or I wasted my time, or whatever sort of negative pattern that you have going on there, you just feel the anxiety. And so we need to disconnect those things so again, we can start focusing on changing the thoughts and strengthening the right ones to really help you build that confidence. And so now, strengthening that belief, what leads to that? The most important thing is reference points. And this is how I've taught this for years, is that you could look at the belief as like a table, and the more legs you have, the stronger the belief. Those are the different reference points and the experiences that you have that lead to that strength of the belief. And then on top of that, the intensity of the reference point. So the stronger and the more intense it was, the more you're going to actually have it. So let's say you have the belief that I'm never going to be successful or successful in business, right? You got to get contextual. And you could have a belief of, you read in a book that people born in Wisconsin are unlikely to be successful. I don't know, I'm just making some bullshit up. And because that's not really that intense, it doesn't even really factor in. But if you have a business mentor and he goes, this is why you'll never be successful, or your dad saying, this is why you'll never be successful, that's really going to intensify the belief. Secondly, associated with that is the authority. And so that too is the same thing. Like if a homeless guy on the street says, dude, you're never going to be successful, you're not even going to listen, you're not even going to put any credence into it. Whereas again, if your dad or your boss or some customer or something like that says, this is why you're never going to be successful, this is why this business sucks or this idea is horrible, that's going to really kind of cut the legs out from that belief, and it's really going to weaken it a lot. And so you can use that on both ways to either intensify and build the belief, leading to, therefore, again, more confidence, or you can do the opposite, and we'll talk about in a second here, a 5-step process to destroy beliefs that are limiting you and that are holding you back, so that you weaken them and you flip them around to all of a sudden you can use them in a way to actually build confidence. And so one more thing before we get into this 5-step process is that people will ask, okay, well, what creates the meaning? Like, where did I get the choosing this of saying, is this a good belief or is this a bad belief? Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this productive or unproductive? What you need to realize is that 80% of your personality was determined before the age of 4. And so all this meaning that you're adding to things, that you're just tacking on to random experiences, you learned at a super young age. The 2-year-old version of yourself, you're playing with blocks and you're modeling your parents and you're saying, oh, okay, that's how I'm going to feel about this. Here you are 20 or 30 years later, still feeling the same way, still reinforcing those old bad habits, those bad beliefs, those bad patterns. So what we're going to do is go through a 5-step process. Take those beliefs, set them over here, disconnecting who you are from the belief. The thoughts that you have about yourself are not who you are, and filling the void with better mindsets, better beliefs, so that you have that confidence. And literally reinforcing it, it becomes automatic. So now let's get into the 5-step process to take a limiting negative belief and flip it into a positive and building that confidence. Step 1 is disconnecting your identity. So one of my truisms of lifestyle development is that it's never your identity, it's always your strategy. And this is super important when it comes to confidence and beliefs, in that we have a certain belief and it's so associated with it. It's so connected, like I said, that you've had it since you're 3 or 4 years old, that you feel that it's a part of who you are. And so the first step, you could look at it from language, and you'll hear people say, well, I'm lazy. Well, I'm unreliable. Well, I'm a procrastinator. And what you need to do is disconnect the I am a procrastinator and put in between acting. So I'm acting lazy. So language is super important. But even more so, just psychologically realizing that you're not a lazy person. You're just acting lazy in certain situations. And that's why that context, that specificity is so important. And then when you disconnect that, now all of a sudden that belief that you thought was part of who you are, you can take it off and say, okay, now let's work it with this. I'm not a depressed person. I just have this thoughts of depression sometime. And now I can go, okay, how can we play with that? How can we use that? Step 2 is filling the void. And so now that you've disconnected the belief from who you are, you've set it over here for a little bit, you can bring it back later on, fill that void with the thing that you want. So if it's, I'll never be successful in business, or even if it's just a question, am I ever going to be successful in business? Or even better, we'll go with, money is the root of all evil. Everyone that has money, they either scam someone or they stole it from someone else. Let's disconnect that, put it over here. What would be a great thing to fill that void? Money is easy. If I can create value, I can have as much income as I would want. I can have the financial dreams that I've always wanted and achieved, and that's going to be really fun for me to achieve. That's just some random belief here that I'll throw out there. Fill the void, that's step 2. Next, what we need to do is reframe past experience, reframe new experiences to make sure they're in alignment with this new belief. So what are things that happened in your past? Like an example would be, let's say in business, let's say you had a marketing funnel and you're like, okay, I got this new marketing strategy. I heard about it from some coach or I read about it in some book. I'm going to try it out. You go off, you do it, it fails flat on your face. You spent all this time, effort, and money in this marketing strategy. And up until recently, up until this video, that was really kind of dragging on you. And you're like, damn, I don't think I'm ever going to be successful. Cut that. I'm never going to be successful. We're going to put that over here. The marketing strategy, what can you learn from it? What can you take away from it? And how can you reframe it to actually realize that you're going to be more successful? And so one example from Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, he talks about how everyone's biggest success came after their biggest failure. And so shit, that marketing strategy, that might be the final stepping stone for you reaching that awesome thing that you're trying to attain here, that business that you're trying to grow. Also, just validated learning coming from the Lean Startup by Eric Ries. You could say, okay, well, I learned this, this, and this from that, and holy shit, this is amazing. I'm learning so many things. If I just keep doing this and failing even faster, my success is inevitable. And so you took that same experience of the failed marketing strategy, and by reframing it, all of a sudden now it's starting to reinforce and build that new belief that you have. And that leads into the next step, which is stacking on the success. And what you want to do is do as many reframes as possible and just be stacking those on, adding more intensity, adding more authority to strengthen that resolve, to strengthen those beliefs. And that's what really leads to building that extreme bulletproof confidence where you know when anything even happens, you're like, okay, hurdle gets in the way, challenge gets in the way. I know I'm going to be successful. I'm just going to push on through, reframe those. These are just more reasons why I'm going to be successful because I'm the only guy who does persevere and push through these things. And that's when things totally flip, where everything just fills in to you strengthening your resolve and those beliefs. And so to take this to an even another level, there's two ways to build artificial beliefs. We talked about, reframing negative ones, going back into your past, looking at all that entire experience file that you had up until now was actually limiting you and holding you back and reframing those into the positive. And so one example would be, I had a client when I was back as a dating coach, and he was homecoming king in high school. And so that is whatever, good or bad, who knows. But you can use that either way. And so he was using it as, they just voted for me because I was just kind of like a nerd and, people felt bad for me. So they voted me as king. And he was using it to decrease his self-esteem. And I said, well, you could choose to view it that way, or you could choose to say, hey, I was the most popular kid in school. And either way, you can choose one. One is going to reinforce good positive beliefs about being social, being confident, deserving, a high quality woman, or you could have the other where it's, self-loathing and sadness and depression. So those reframes stacking on the success there is huge, but even going more crazy with this, and this is like when you realize this, it's just like, holy shit, you hit a whole nother level, is that you can artificially create reference points. And this is where the power of visualization comes in. And this is why in all my courses and with my clients, there's levels where we go through times where it's close your eyes and actually visualize, imagine yourself having the success that you plan to have. And just you're going through that and you're hearing the things that you hear. Me, I picture myself in a chair kind of like this, looking out at a view kind of like this, and lo and behold, it leads to things like that happening because visualization, there's been all sorts of studies done where like old grandmas were shooting free throws and then just visualizing shooting free throws, and both of them led to progressing and increasing their performance. So you can create artificial reference points as well by just visualizing and consistently thinking about the success that you want to have and having things to reinforce those beliefs so that confidence builds even more. And the fifth and final step is you gotta habitualize the belief. And what I mean by this is the old pattern that you used to have, that old belief that popped up in certain situations when you're going to approach a girl, when you're thinking about starting a business, when you're thinking about asking your boss for a raise, when you're thinking about moving out of your house or moving to a different country. Boom, all of a sudden you have a pattern, you have a habit of something used to pop up, some sort of thought popped in there. You disconnected it, you did all the things that we talked about, you filled the void. What you need to start doing is interrupting that old pattern and start filling the void with the new one. And what you do is you de-automate the old habit, the old belief. All it is a habit that kind of instinctually kicked in, and you start automating the new one. And so it's not going to change overnight, although it could. Sometimes I talk with a guy and literally everything changes because once you make the unconscious conscious, your brain starts working to resolve these things. But then when you automate that, you start reinforcing that new habit. What happens after a time is that becomes the new default. It becomes the new thing, the new thought of when you go up and you want to talk to that girl, you go, yes, let's do this. Or when you're building that business and something happens, like the marketing strategy fails, you go, oh shit, awesome learning lesson here. Let's do it again, even faster next time around. That happens through a very conscious process of de-automating old beliefs, de-automating old habits, and automating these new, more healthy and productive ones. And so there you go. You got the 5-step process to start building more productive, confident beliefs and increasing that confidence there. And so you might ask, hey, what about core confidence? And I'll tell you, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as core confidence. What it comes down to is when you look contextually and you start building confidence around all these different areas, it leads to your baseline starting to go up and you do feel more confident to go into any new endeavor. But it comes from grabbing these things with that level of specificity, and context is so important. And so if you like this topic and you want to know more, just click here to subscribe. We got videos coming out every single week, as well as down here, I got a little playlist, which I call lifestyle development, lifestyle design plus self-development. You'll see all sorts of cool stuff there. Check it out. And as always, enjoy.